everyone. Welcome to Engineering Excellence through Iterative Cycles of Improvement. My name is Carrie Buhanger, and I'm the principal at St. Philip Neri School, a Notre Dame ACE Academy in Indianapolis.
My name is Carissa Maddox. I'm the Regional Director for the Notre Dame ACE Academies here in Indianapolis.
And I'm Frankie Jones, the Coordinator of Teaching and Learning for our Notre Dame ACE Academies. We want to begin by just orienting to our work, and hopefully you were able to access the slide deck in the accompanying resource folder linked in with this video. But if not, please pause and take some time and care to type in this especially long URL, we apologize for that, to access them. So to begin our time together today, we know a great deal about the most powerful ways to accelerate student learning in our schools. In Notre Dame ACE Academies, we often say that the best way to maximize student learning is to maximize adult learning. Yet you all know well that the role of the Catholic school principal is not only expansive, it is incredibly complex. One leader, no matter how skilled or motivated, cannot be the expert on all things teaching and learning, especially while overseeing the budget, enrollment management, school culture, faith formation, parent partnership, and the list goes on. And so we invite you to focus not only on human capital, developing the talents of individuals in the school, but really to emphasize social capital, the abilities of teachers to work together in productive ways anchored in learning, ultimately to change the way that people work together. Before we dive into the cycle of improvement, take just a moment to think about teaching and learning initiatives you've been a part of as an educator. Have you ever experienced an initiative for improvement that faded away or failed? Have you ever experienced a sense of initiative overload, that there were so many spinning plates you weren't sure what to pay attention to? And finally, when have change initiatives stayed the course? And what was different about those? What enabled success? Be welcome to pause your video here and just stop and jot a few of your reflections in response to these questions. Now, what we feel is true in our schools and in schools everywhere is that it's not for a lack of good intention or will that so many initiatives fade or fail. Largely, it's a lack of process that helps sustain the focus so that we can achieve those ambitious goals, but in manageable ways. In Notre Dame ACE Academies and Catholics everywhere, we believe that we're made for each other in the image and likeness of God. And as St. Paul reminds us, we're called to fan into flame the gifts that God gave each one of us. And so we see our work in Catholic schools as a vocation of collective responsibility. I'm responsible for your success and you're responsible for mine. As such, Notre Dame ACE Academy leaders set ambitious goals and then prioritize adult learning to ensure that all teachers have the training and support they need to make goals a reality in our schools. So we've focused our annual goal work within cycles of improvement. We make audacious goals more feasible by embedding that work into the fabric of each and every school day. First, we backwards design key benchmarks for adult learning from our goal, just like teachers do with course planning in their classrooms. In a culture for learning, we want to focus on mastery of skillful practice with teachers rather than just coverage of lots of topics. And we can use this cycle of improvement to ensure that new teacher formation takes firm root in our classrooms before we move forward. So ultimately, this collaborative cycle is a sustained approach that develops the capacity of teachers, but in a way that engages them in the process and embeds formative checks of uptake of this new learning. Let's walk through each of the 5 steps along the cycle briefly together. First, effective improvement requires that we take the big goals and break them down into concrete actions and behaviors. Each week, ideally, we gather teachers in faculty meetings or grade band PLCs to work together on getting better in one particular focus area of our practice. This focus should be based on the benchmarks of our goal, as well as ongoing data collection from observations and walkthroughs and teachers' voice. What do teachers and the leadership team think is most needed to meet students' needs and attain this goal? One question that we like to ask ourselves is, what will be qualitatively different about teacher practice as a result of this week's work? Once we've established the focus, we now have to figure out how to help teachers get better at or learn the new practice. We can't expect our way to excellence. We have to engineer it. And a fundamental task of leaders is to create the conditions that ensure teachers have the resources, time, space, and processes in place to gradually acquire the skills and knowledge needed to meet their students' needs. There are three critical pieces to capacity building we'd like you to keep in mind. First, always begin with the rationale, the why. Your task is to ensure all teachers can articulate why this practice matters for them and for their students. Secondly, focus in on the concrete knowledge and skills teachers need. What do teachers need to know better in order to be able to do better? And finally, we want to ensure that there is a shared definition at our school of what this practice looks like when done skillfully. In Notre Dame ACE Academies and in this presentation today, we use the language of criteria of success to enable this shared understanding. For each new practice, we work with teachers to draw on their professional expertise and research to identify the key components that make that practice successful. By and large, these exist as simple bullet lists of the indicators we're looking for to know that the practice has been taken up with fidelity. From there, we move into collective commitments. When teachers are involved in articulating the specific commitments for implementation of new learning, they're more committed and therefore more likely to be successful. Adult capacity building sessions are most powerful when they end with everyone publicly committing to next steps, including the leadership team. Now, you've already attended to the critical aspects of human and social capital, but follow through in terms of implementation and collection of data is absolutely essential to foster efficacy and commitment among your teachers. Remember that accountability for such uptake is actually an act of care when we've truly set teachers up for success, as you would have done within this cycle. And finally, we want to ensure that we analyze data to inform our next steps. Just like in the classroom, what matters is whether they've learned it, not whether we taught it. And so leadership should take the defined criteria of success and ensure they're getting into classrooms to collect data around those. What stuck from the learning and what didn't? In our analysis, we want to ensure that we focus in first on trends. What can we celebrate? What's happening in all of our classrooms and going well from the new learning? And also to identify potential opportunities. Where did some of the learning not quite stick? And we might want to revisit or refresh. Also pay attention to outliers. Is a teacher emerging as particularly skilled in this domain? And can we target them and tap them for some leadership among the other teachers? And also, might there be a teacher who's surfacing a need for additional support, more one-on-one time for coaching and support in taking this practice to the next level? That was a lot of information. And so we want to invite you to take some time to reflect. Perhaps go back and review the last few slides. Shore up your own understanding of the cycle before we walk through some concrete examples of the cycle in action. You can pause here. A final note before we look at the cycle in action, these cycles can't exist in a vacuum. If we were to simply try these approaches, but with a hodgepodge of focus areas, number talks one week, read aloud the next, checks for understanding following that, we're simply recreating initiative fatigue, but just in a new format. So these cycles are most powerful when they're embedded within an intentional plan to gradually build capacity towards one coherent goal.
And now we're going to dive deeper and look at a goal, benchmarks, and cycles that we enacted at St. Philip Neri. You will see here that part of our larger literacy goal was to build better readers. To get there, we identified 3 main benchmarks. This included instructional read-alouds, supported independent reading, and key vocabulary strategies. Today, we're going to zoom in on our second benchmark, daily supported independent reading in all classrooms, and explore how we leverage cycles of continuous improvement to move instruction forward. After we determined our focus of supported independent reading, we had to establish the why. As we all know, being told something is not going to motivate or educate teachers, but taking the time to dive into research and learn about the impact an instructional strategy can have on our students can increase buy-in and improve teacher practice tremendously. Our leadership team and teachers use this research to create our criteria of success. This helped us pick out the most important pieces that teachers would need to effectively implement independent reading in their classrooms. Our criteria of success were used as a guide for teacher planning and preparation and as an assessment tool for the leadership team. You may notice that these criteria of success are very specific and can be assessed and measured during a classroom observation or walkthrough. The criteria of success led us to establish our threshold for teacher uptake and guided our decision-making as to when we should move on to our next benchmark. Does that mean that 15% of teachers not meeting the criteria of success are on their own? No, of course not. Instead, this information would identify teachers that are in need of further support. This could potentially happen through a PLC or through one-on-one coaching. But a threshold of 85% allows us to move on to our next step for the overwhelming majority of teachers.
So with criteria of success in hand, the leadership team started getting into classrooms during protected independent reading time. We found that the majority of teachers included daily independent reading in their plans and gave the students plenty of choice with regards to book selection. Additionally, teachers were up and about, circulating and talking with students about their reading. After multiple observations, only one teacher seemed really hesitant to let students choose books for independent reading. The leadership team decided to address the rationale behind student choice through coaching with this individual in order to continue to move forward with the group. Our data, as you see on your screen, showed that thresholds were not met for mini lessons, student conferencing, and tracking and note-taking. At this point, we realized creating an independent reading practice in a classroom was a major lift, and the responsibility of the leadership team, it was the responsibility of the leadership team to build adult capacity in these areas and where we were just not yet proficient. We started a new cycle on mini lessons for independent reading, meeting in PLCs. Teams watched videos of sample mini lessons and developed criteria of success for explicit instruction during these mini lessons. Teachers planned mini lessons, practiced together, and then the administration observed each teacher in action. The teachers did a great job moving towards including effective mini lessons into their day. We noted, however, that many teachers modeled, but they neglected to think aloud during their mini lesson. Making the thoughts of the expert visible was a key instructional move for us, and we wanted to be sure that it took place. Subsequently, we started a third cycle on thinking aloud. You know, to move the school to an effective independent reading practice, which happens in 85% of classrooms, meeting 90% of thresholds most of the time, takes a while. In fact, it took us 8 to 10 cycles and several months of work. It's important to note here that there's no right answer to the question, how many cycles should this take? That's why establishing thresholds at the very beginning of the work is so important. You know, it's fun to watch changes take shape with the cycles. As teachers start to feel that their practice is growing and they experience success, they become more confident, and it is truly a joy to watch student learning increase. Even though we are deeply committed to improvement cycles, I also wanted to share here that there will be temptations to move forward before thresholds are met or to layer on additional initiatives. We know firsthand that there is always so much to do, and it is tempting to push to do it all or to move forward before your staff is ready to do so. But think about what'll happen if you give in to this temptation. You guessed it, initiative fatigue, failure to implement, the instructional strategy that you've worked so hard to add in to practice will fade out, or many initiatives will be tempted all at once, causing chaos. which would lead to doing many things, but none of them particularly well.
You just saw an example of an instructional cycle for continuous improvement, but this is not a tool that just lives in our instructional world alone. This can also be used for advancement goals, for school culture goals throughout your building as well. Right now, we're going to take a look at a vignette that will help us have an at-bat with what our first right next step may be. So pretend you are this school leader, and here's the information that you've collected. In August, school leaders felt that the start of the school day was chaotic. It was taking longer than they would like for teachers to begin instruction, and on many mornings, teachers could be heard raising their voices. Because they believe that every minute counts, school leaders decided to lead adult learning and start a cycle. Now pause for a moment. If you were this school leader, what would your focus be for your next cycle? This information led us to focus in on improving arrival and transition procedures.
So here, the teaching team met with one another and collaboratively decided that transitions and arrivals would include several criteria of success, which included communicating step-by-step expectations to students, both orally and in writing. Teachers would be up and visible and visually scanning the room to monitor expectations. Teachers would use positive narration and praise students by name, stating the specific actions that they were using. And when students were not meeting expectations, the teacher would use the least invasive redirection possible. The leadership team then observed in classrooms. And on this next slide, you will see the data they collected for grades 3, 4, and 5. We invite you to pause your video and examine the data. And think to yourself, if I was this school leader and this was my 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade team, what would be my next step? Is this team ready to move forward? Or is there another cycle that could be implemented to ensure success with arrivals and transitions? If there is, what is it and what should adult learning look like? During the pause, be welcome to use the blank cycle provided and plan an adult learning cycle that would continue to move this work forward.
You may have noticed some trends of celebration. Here we see that all teachers are decomposing expectations step by step. Take time to celebrate it. We also see that 2 of the 3 teachers are communicating orally and visually. We can gently remind the 3rd grade teacher of why a visual cue is so helpful for students, but it doesn't warrant time for the whole group. You may have noticed also that the remaining 3 criteria are not yet being met among this group of teachers. There's not just one right next step, but we wanted to share some of our thinking as we process through this data. While we do want teachers using positive narration and least invasive redirection to protect the transition procedures, we felt that these could be best implemented if teachers are scanning and circulating to catch students doing something great and also noticing students that may need a little bit more redirection. So with this focus, teacher scanning and circulating, we can launch into our next cycle. Take a minute, if it's helpful, to pause and read through what a cycle for this focus might look like, and you may want to even compare it with what you came up with on your own.
We hope that you found that guided practice helpful. And more importantly, we hope that you've been inspired and feel equipped to think about how to take the cycle for a spin within your own school, focused on your own goals for improvement. As you consider what you might map out for a cycle within your own school, keep in mind some of the key questions for each step. In terms of focus, what is an area of low lift but high impact that could really accelerate student learning in our school? What teacher behavior can be changed to better enhance our student outcomes? Then move in to building teachers' capacity. Who can be involved in leading learning in this area? And what resources might you draw on to help your faculty define the criteria of success for this practice in your particular school? Make sure to articulate collective commitments, remembering that without involvement, there won't be commitment. And don't let yourself off the hook. What will you and your leadership team do as well? What are you committing to in ensuring teacher success and ultimately student success? Move into implementing and enacting the behaviors in the classroom and as a leadership team, gathering the needed data, and then take time to comb through your data. Notice those trends of celebration and make sure to celebrate them. Notice too the trends that are telling you an area of the learning that has not yet stuck, and you might need to revisit or refine your approach with them. And don't forget to also honor and notice those who are standing out, those teachers who might be tapped for leadership in those domains, and those teachers who might need a follow-up one-on-one conversation and additional support. As you do this work, know that we've linked in a number of resources for helping you to think about how to build capacity and define criteria of success, both in the areas of literacy, math, and general non-content specific pedagogy. In addition to these resources, know that we truly do want to take up collective responsibility for this work in your school as well, and want to ensure that you have a way of contacting us. Please do not hesitate to reach out with any questions. And also, please absolutely share any areas of success you have as you take these cycles for a spin in your own school. Thank you so much for your time, and we hope to hear from you soon.